Listen carefully. You know, there is something most people do not understand about the teachings I gave Neville Goddard. They think everything I taught him, he taught publicly. They believe they know all my methods because they have read his lectures and books. But that is not true. There were five specific techniques I taught Neville that he was warned never to share with the unprepared. Five methods so powerful, so dangerous to those still clinging to their old beliefs that they could shatter a person's entire reality if received before they were ready. These were not held back out of secrecy for its own sake. They were held back because they demand something most people refuse to give: the complete death of who you thought you were. My name is Abdullah. I taught Neville Goddard for 5 years in New York City, beginning in 1931. And though times have changed, though the world has transformed beyond recognition, these techniques are as powerful and as dangerous as they were then. Why dangerous? Because once you truly understand these five principles, you can never go back to believing in external causes. You can never again blame circumstances, other people, or fate for what appears in your life. Most people say they want this freedom, but when confronted with the full weight of creative responsibility, they retreat. They prefer the comfort of victimhood to the terror of absolute power. These five forbidden techniques strip away every excuse, every crutch, every hiding place. And that is exactly why Neville was warned never to share them with those who were unprepared. But you are reading these words right now, which means you were led here, which means the brothers have told me you are ready. So let me take you back to 1931, when a desperate young dancer first walked into my lecture hall on West 72nd Street in New York City. His name was Neville Goddard. He had been told about this Ethiopian mystic who taught ancient wisdom. He was unemployed, struggling, and like most people, he thought the answer to his problems was learning some technique or secret formula. When he finally arrived at my door, I looked at him and said something that startled him. Neville, you are 6 months late. He was confused. I beg your pardon? I do not know you. The brothers told me you would come, I said. You are 6 months late, but you are right on time. This was not mysticism for its own sake. This was the first lesson. There are no accidents. His delay was not a mistake. It was necessary. He needed to be exactly who he was at that moment, carrying exactly the desperation he carried for the teachings to take root. Before I would teach him anything about manifesting wealth or success, I told him something that shocked him. Neville, you must first start with self. Find self. Do not be ashamed of the being you are. Discover it and start the changing of that self. And this brings us to the first forbidden technique. The first forbidden technique: find self. Most people who study consciousness never actually discover who they are. They study techniques, memorize affirmations, practice visualization, but they never look at the actual being doing all these things. They do not want to look because when you truly find self, you discover something terrifying. You are the cause of everything you have experienced. Not partially, not mostly, everything. This is why this technique was forbidden for the unprepared. Because once you find self, once you truly discover the being you are, you can no longer hide from your creative power. When Neville came to me unemployed and broke, he thought his problems were external: the economy, his circumstances, his lack of opportunity. But I told him there is no cause outside of the arrangement of your own mind. He was not ready to hear this. Most people are not. So I gave him the first forbidden technique: sit quietly. Stop trying to change anything. Stop looking for solutions. Simply observe the being you actually are right now. Watch your inner conversations. Listen to what you tell yourself about money, about success, about your worth. Do not judge it. Do not try to change it yet. Just see it clearly, because you cannot change what you refuse to see. For weeks, Neville resisted this. He wanted techniques. He wanted formulas. He wanted me to give him something he could do. But I insisted, first, find self. Discover who you actually are beneath all the techniques. And when he finally stopped resisting, when he finally looked honestly at the being he was, he discovered something shocking. His poverty was not happening to him. It was happening through him. Every belief he held about himself, every inner conversation, every assumption was creating his experience. This discovery is terrifying because it means you are responsible completely, not for what others do, but for what appears in your world. And this is why this technique was forbidden, because most people would rather blame the world than accept this level of creative responsibility. But once you find self, once you see clearly who you actually are, then and only then can the real work begin. The second forbidden technique, the potter and the clay. After Neville finally found self, after he saw clearly the being he was, I taught him the second forbidden technique. I would paint vases in those days, beautiful blue vases with almond blossoms. And one day, while working on a particularly lovely piece, I told him something that changed everything. Eternal mind the potter is, and thought the eternal clay. He did not understand at first. So I explained, your body, your circumstances, your entire experience is thought. It is clay. And your imagination, your consciousness, your I am is the potter. The potter shapes the clay. The clay cannot complain to the potter. It cannot resist. It has no will of its own. It simply takes whatever form the potter gives it. This technique was forbidden because it destroys the belief that your body has its own agenda, that circumstances have their own momentum, that reality has its own rules independent of consciousness. No. Reality is clay. Your consciousness is the potter, and you can shape it into anything you determine. I told Neville, once you regard your body as a detached sort of thing upon which you are working out the design of your highest concept, you would hear no complaint from it, for you would be in authority. Think about what this means. Your body is not the master. Consciousness is the master. The body, the circumstances, the world itself is simply clay being molded by the potter. This is why people got sick when they tried to use this technique before they were ready, because they would try to change their body while still believing the body was real, was solid, was in charge. But the potter does not ask permission from the clay. The potter simply molds. When you are the potter working with clay, you do not worry about whether the clay wants to be shaped. You do not concern yourself with the clay's resistance. The clay has no will. It simply is. And this is the truth about your body, your circumstances, your entire experience. They are clay in the hands of your consciousness, and consciousness can shape them into anything it determines. But first, you must accept your role as potter. And most people refuse. They want to negotiate with the clay. They want the clay to cooperate. This is backwards. You are the potter. The clay has no choice but to conform. The third forbidden technique, blind belief in signs. Now we come to the technique that destroyed more students than any other. The technique that Neville struggled with for months. The technique that even today keeps most people trapped in seeking rather than having. Blind belief in signs. One evening, a student named Sirach came to me. He was troubled. He had prayed in silence, then placed his hands on a part of the sacred scrolls, reading whatever verse appeared, trying to find an answer to his prayer. I looked at him and said something that shocked him. This is the rankest kind of superstition. It is a belief in a separate God. It is blind belief, looking for a sign in the sacred scrolls. He was confused. Do you mean we are not to go outside ourselves for help? That is exactly what I mean, I told him. There is absolutely nothing outside of you that can help or harm you. This technique was forbidden because it strips away the last comfort most people cling to, the hope that something external will save them. When you pray and then immediately look for a sign, you are demonstrating that you do not actually believe your prayer was answered. You are looking for confirmation from the clay instead of knowing you are the potter who just shaped it. Truth is founded on a principle, and though you hold your hand on that principle all day, it will not work out a single problem. What is required is the application. When you pray, the answer is given to you in that moment, not later, not when a sign appears. In that moment, along with the way to put it into practice. The technique is this: when you imagine, when you assume, do not then look for signs. Do not check your bank account. Do not examine circumstances for validation, Because looking for signs is saying, I am not sure if what I did worked. Let me see if the external world confirms it. This is backwards. The external world cannot confirm anything. It can only reflect what you have already assumed in consciousness. Neville struggled terribly with this when he wanted to go to Barbados. After I told him, you are in Barbados, he kept looking for signs. How would he get there? Where would the money come from? What was the bridge of incidents? And every time he asked these questions, I shut the door on him because asking these questions was demonstrating that he did not actually believe he was already in Barbados. The forbidden technique is complete trust in what you have done in imagination, with zero need for external confirmation. This destroys most people because they have been conditioned to trust only what they can see, touch, measure. They need evidence. They need proof. But by the time you have evidence, the creation has already happened. You are simply observing the fruit of what you planted in consciousness weeks or months ago. The master plants in imagination and never checks the soil to see if it is growing. The master knows it is growing because the law is certain. This is why this technique was forbidden, because it requires absolute faith in that which is invisible, and most people are not ready for that. Now, before we continue to the fourth and fifth forbidden techniques, there is something you need to know. Everything I am teaching you right now, these 5 forbidden techniques, requires practical support. They require tools you can use when doubt creeps in, when you fall out of the state, when the old self tries to reclaim its territory. That is why we have prepared something called the Manifest Reset. It contains 5 practical resets, 5 simple shifts that will guide you back to center when you need it most. One reset shows you how to stop forcing the feeling when visualization feels fake. Another reveals the difference between letting go and giving up. A third teaches you what to do when doubt and delay seem to contradict your assumption. These are based on everything I taught Neville, everything he taught his thousands of students, everything that actually works. To receive the Manifest Reset Guide, simply comment reset below right now. It is completely free. These resets will become your companions on this journey, your way back to center when the forbidden techniques feel too intense, too demanding, too real. Comment reset right now because what I am about to reveal in the fourth and fifth techniques will test everything you believe about reality itself. The fourth forbidden technique, treatment. After months of working with Neville, after he had learned to find self, to be the potter, to stop seeking signs, I taught him the technique that would change everything, treatment. Most people pray, they beg, they ask, they hope for intervention from something outside themselves. But I taught Neville something different, something that was never meant for public consumption because it places all responsibility on you. Treatment is the practical application of prayer, but it is not what you think. When someone comes to you sick, poor, troubled, you do not pray for them. You do not ask God to heal them. You do not hope for intervention. You treat them, which means you see them as they would have to be if they were already whole, already wealthy, already free. And here is what makes this technique forbidden. You do this whether they know it or not, whether they believe it or not, whether they cooperate or not, because you are not healing a person. You are shaping the clay, and the clay has no opinion about how it is shaped. The technique is this: stand aside from the condition, deny it reality, not by saying it does not exist, but by occupying the consciousness of someone for whom this condition has no existence. When Neville saw someone ill, I taught him to immediately treat them by seeing them whole, not hoping they would be healed, not praying for healing, but seeing them as whole in that moment. This is dangerous because most people believe conditions are real, are solid, have their own power. And when you treat by denying the condition reality, you are claiming that consciousness is the only reality. Most people will not do this. They will say, but I can see they are sick. I can see they are broke. I can see they are suffering. And that is exactly why they cannot help, because they are treating the condition as real, as having power, as existing independent of consciousness. But the master knows the condition is clay. It has no power. It has no reality. It simply is whatever the potter shapes it to be. When you treat properly, you are not manipulating anything. You are simply occupying a state of consciousness in which this condition does not exist. And because consciousness is the only reality, the condition must dissolve. This technique was forbidden because it requires you to trust consciousness over evidence, to trust imagination over sight, to trust assumption over fact. And most people are not ready for that level of faith. The fifth forbidden technique, thought as substance. And now we come to the final forbidden technique, the one that once you truly understand it, changes everything. Most people think thoughts are fleeting, insubstantial, just mental activity that comes and goes without consequence. But I taught Neville something that terrified him at first. Thought is as powerful as a deed, sometimes more so. There are many things you can think that you would never put into action, things you would never say, things you would never do. Yet, in some vague way, you believe these thoughts do not matter because they remain just thoughts. This is dangerously wrong. Every thought is substance. Every inner conversation is molding the clay. Every assumption, no matter how briefly held, is shaping your reality. If people truly understood what thought is, they would be amazed, open-eyed with wonderment. They would govern their thoughts absolutely. They would watch their inner conversations as carefully as their outer actions. Because thought is the actual creative power, not words, not actions. Thought. The technique is this. Treat your thoughts as if they were actual deeds being done in the physical world, because they are. When you think, I cannot afford that, you are not merely observing a fact, you are creating it. You are molding the clay into the form of poverty. When you think, I am not good enough, you are not merely having a thought, you are assuming an identity, and that identity will harden into fact. This is why this technique was forbidden, because once you understand that thought is substance, you can never think carelessly again. Every inner conversation matters. Every brief assumption shapes reality. Every mental image is impressing the clay. Most people would be paralyzed by this knowledge. They would become afraid of their own thoughts. They would try to police every mental movement. But that is not the point. The point is to become conscious, to govern thought deliberately, rather than letting it run wild. When Neville finally understood this, when he truly grasped that his thoughts were substance, he stopped checking his circumstances. He stopped worrying about conditions. He stopped trying to make things happen. Instead, he simply governed his thoughts. He occupied the consciousness of the person he wanted to be, and he let the clay conform to the potter's design. This is mastery, not control over circumstances, but governance of thought. Because thought is the only substance that matters, the integration. So here we have the 5 forbidden techniques I taught Neville. 1, find self, discover who you actually are beneath all the techniques. 2, the potter and the clay, consciousness molds reality like clay. 3, blind belief in signs, never seek external confirmation. 4, treatment, deny conditions reality by occupying the consciousness of their opposite. 5, thought as substance, every mental movement shapes your world. These techniques were forbidden because they require something most people refuse to give: complete acceptance of creative responsibility. No more blaming circumstances, no more waiting for external salvation, no more treating conditions as real, just consciousness, pure, powerful, absolute. When Neville finally integrated these 5 techniques, when he finally stopped resisting and started being the potter, everything changed. He manifested his trip to Barbados despite having no money. He received an honorable discharge from the army during wartime. He built a life of complete creative freedom, not because he learned some secret formula, but because he accepted the truth these 5 forbidden techniques reveal. You are the cause. You are the potter. You are consciousness itself, molding the clay of reality into whatever form you determine. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Abdullah, this is overwhelming. How do I actually practice this when everything around me contradicts it? Thank you for listening. If this truth stirred something in you, do not keep it to yourself. Share this message with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to Stories and Quotes B for more teachings that do not just inform you, they transform you. You were led here. The brothers have spoken. Now go and be the potter.